Well, Cain's line pretty much stinks and isn't going anywhere. But that's all you got right now. So you keep reading in the text, and you notice what the storyteller does? He has traced all of these generations of Cain down to that guy Lamech who was boasting about murder. And then the storyteller brings you all the way back. Look at chapter 4, verse 25. Back to the first man and his wife. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son and called his name Seth. Something like replacement. For she said, God has appointed for me another offspring instead of Abel, for Cain killed him. You see, there is another line. Someone more like Abel. Someone to replace Abel. Another line of offspring that you can follow from Adam and Eve through Seth. And that's what the narrator is going to tell us. See, he's setting up this huge contrast. The line of Cain, kind of like the offspring of the serpent, leading down to a Lamech who speaks and boasts of murder, and then reaches all the way back to another line, someone like Abel, the line of Seth, so that we can trace his offspring. And that's what you're going to see throughout chapter 5. The end of chapter 4 says, at that time, people began to call upon the name of the Lord. And chapter 5 says, this is the book of the generations of Adam. Remember, every time you see a line like that, you better pay attention to it in the book of Genesis. This is the book of the generations of Adam. And you read through chapter 5, and you're going to see all kinds of numbers if you're looking at the ESV, lots of repetition. And what I want you to do, if you would, I think it would be good for you to take a couple of minutes, maybe pause the recording, take a couple minutes, look at chapter 5, and just jot down a few things that you observe. What's repeated in the text? What are the things that stand out to you in chapter 5? And then we can walk through it. Now, for me, I'm not going to wait around for you to do that. You can do that on your own with the pause button. I'm going to just walk through some of the things that I see in the text. So you look at chapter 5. Notice at the beginning, I think something really important. As the writer is telling you and kind of rehearsing Adam and Eve, and then their line through Seth, look at what it says in verse 1. This is the book of the generations of Adam. When God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. Male and female he created them, and he blessed them and named them man when they were created. That's like Genesis chapter 1. Then when Adam had lived 130 years, he fathered a son in his own likeness, after his image, and named him Seth. Now the thing I want you to pay attention, did you notice image and likeness? Adam and his wife, Eve, were made in the image and likeness of God. And then the author makes it a point to show you that then they have offspring, and those offspring are in the image and likeness of Adam and Eve. And I think what's happening there is it's answering a question for us that maybe we might be thinking, if Adam and Eve have rebelled and been banished from the garden, they were in the image and likeness of God, but what about their offspring? Are their offspring in the image and likeness of God? And I think this text points that out. Now, of course, things have been lost from what they had in the garden, but I think this is a text that's pointing out to us that Adam and Eve have children, and those children are in the image and likeness of Adam, who's in the image and likeness of God. That defining characteristic of human beings, the thing that sets us apart from all other creatures, still exists. We're still in the image and likeness of God, however much that image and likeness might be distorted because of our foolish rebellion and sin. We're still precious in the sight of God. We're still in his image. That's one of the things that I noticed from chapter 5. But probably the main thing you noticed is how old everybody is, right? I mean, you start reading things like 912 years old, 910 years old, all this kind of stuff, and we're like, wow, that would be amazing. I mean, it's amazing to us to find somebody who lives to be 100. I mean, to live to be 900 years old, it just is astonishing for us. But I think that maybe what happens with this is we miss the repetition in the text. And I think the repetition is the thing that we're supposed to really pay attention to. Because look at, for example, verse 5. Thus all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. Then chapter 5, verse 8. Thus all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died. Verse 11. Thus all the days of Enosh were 905 years, and he died. See, often, I can remember even as a kid, somebody would ask me, who is the oldest guy ever in the Bible? Say Methuselah lived to be 969 years old. It was just like this trivia question that I could always remember. And that was like the thing I remembered from Genesis chapter 5. Wow, these guys lived a long time. And they did. There's something to learn from that. But I think what the author is just pounding over and over and over again is that guy died. Adam died. His son died. His son died. They all died. Why? Because this is the fulfillment of God's curse. Adam returned to the dust because of his sin. Death reigned over Adam and over all those who belonged to Adam, even those who were in the likeness of Adam. Death reigned and won, and the ground took them again. Except for one guy, and maybe you noticed that. That's just an interesting thing about this guy named Enoch. Down in verse 21, when Enoch had lived 65 years, he fathered Methuselah, and Enoch walked with God. Well, I've never seen anybody do that before in the text. Verse 24 again, Enoch walked with God. You see, there's a possibility apparently for people to have fellowship with God still. To walk with God. In some respects like they did in the garden, it would seem. Wow, that's amazing. But then there's this curious, mysterious comment in verse 24. You might have noticed it if you took the time to pause and look through the text. Enoch walked with God, and he was not. He was not what? He was not. For God took him. What does that mean? He was not. Seems like Enoch, as opposed to everybody else, didn't die in the same way. He just was not one day because God took him. God took him where? He walked with God and then he just wasn't because God took him. And does that indicate maybe there's some concept in the Bible that people could live beyond these years that they live on this earth? It at least raises some questions. It's kind of mysterious for us. But I think the most important thing for us to walk away from chapter 5 with is this. That chapter 4, the big line of Cain down to a Lamech who speak, makes the big contrast with chapter 5, which traces Adam and Eve through the line of Seth all the way down to what guy? A guy who speaks named Lamech. Did you see it? The big contrast. We follow Cain's line to a Lamech who boasts of murder. That's a dead end. And then we step back and we follow Seth's line all the way down to a guy named Lamech who's speaking when he's holding a little baby boy in his arms. And what does he say? Genesis chapter 5, verse 28. When Lamech had lived 182 years, he fathered a son and called his name Noah, saying, out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, this one shall bring us relief from our work and from the painful toil of our hands. See, that guy in that line, I think he picked up on that one line of hope. All the way back in the garden, it's being passed down from generation to generation so that this line, the line of Seth, maybe the offspring of the woman, leads all the way down to another Lamech who's holding this boy in his arms, and he's saying, I'm going to call you Noah, because out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, this little boy is going to bring us relief from the curse. That's his hope, that maybe in this son, Noah, God will be able to overturn the curse. Maybe God will be able to use this son to rescue the world from the devastating curse that we experienced all the way back in the garden. Well, will Noah be able to do that? We'll have to find out next time.